People who cater to the super rich, what things have you seen? Worked at a restaurant where a few of the regulars were the children of billionaires. I told my parents that my tuition costs $500,000, a student, from China, in America, I overheard after being asked how she has so much money. Another time I was serving a table, I was asked to bring a tray of 60 patron shots, $600, for a 19-year-old student. I must have had an incredulous look on my face because his only response to assuage my concern was, "My father owns diamond mines in Africa." I heard an interview on the radio from a guy who was from my hometown in the UK who was Stallone's personal chef in the 90s. He said Stallone was a nice guy. He had something in his house where he could watch the amount of tickets his films was selling in live time, so knew almost immediately whether it was a flop or not. He was married to Bridget Nielsen at the time, and this chef said she was walking about topless or naked all the time, which he thought was strange until she walked up to him one time when Stallone was out and offered it to him on a plate. He politely declined because he liked Stallone and they were divorced a few years later, so there may have been other things going on. My dad works in shipping and has a lot of friends who have worked on super yachts. In the 90s, one of his mates got a call up to bring the yacht of a particular Australian media tycoon billionaire, not that one, from Sydney to New York, with instructions to be anchored in a particular bay at an exact time with a lunch spread for 50 people ready. So they got there and set up the food. The guy never showed up. Turns out he was having a rich dude party in a building overlooking the harbor and wanted to be able to point down and say, "That's my boat." He wanted the lunch just in case he decided to take his rich friends down to his yacht, but he didn't feel like it that day, so all the food got wasted and they sailed back to AUS without seeing him. I used to work for a company that modified aircraft for really rich people. I'm talking 747s, not Gulfstreams. This company had made several aircraft for this one customer, who I was told had purchased a new one solely because his spiritual advisor had told him that one of his current planes was bad luck. He still let his wife use it for her personal travel. To me, one of the most exquisite features of these planes wasn't the gold-plated everything, or rare wood veneers, it was the silk carpet. That stuff cost over $1,000 per square foot and feels like walking on a bed of angel feathers harvested in the most inhumane way possible. Granted, these guys don't deck out the whole plane, just their personal areas. The aft third is usually reserved for staff and such and is more like a fancy economy class, but yeah, silk carpet. I worked at a low-end retail store and had a rich woman spend $1,500 USD on clothes. She didn't try any of them on, and she filled 2 shopping carts. As I was ringing her up, we had a long time to chat because the transaction took so long, and she told me that she hated clothes shopping. She would occasionally just buy a bunch of random stuff and put it in her closet, and anything she didn't like as she was getting dressed she would simply throw away. Edit. I also just want to add that this customer was extremely unpleasant and rude to us lowly cashiers, and bragged about the limit on her credit card and how much money she had. This makes me think she was newly rich, or maybe only moderately rich. I did IT work for a tiny little private company like the owner, his brother, and me. Guy called because his new PC wouldn't turn on and it's like 3 p.m. He was 100% willing to pay for me to drive 5 hours one way to get it working today because he wanted to play games today. Okay, so 5-hour road trip one way and the address is this huge fucking mansion. 100% thought I was in the wrong place. Use the intercom at the gate and nope, this is the place. Guy and his wife are really cool and the dude had built his own gaming rig. It was absolutely over the top. I had never even laid eyes on hardware that expensive before. He never turned the power switch on his PSU on. He paid the base rate of $1,400 for me to come out there to flip a switch. I also installed his graphic drivers, but that was technically free, and then gave me $5,000 cash as a tip, all because he was excited to play League of Legends on his new PC. Was invited to a Christmas dinner while I lived in Seoul by an extremely wealthy Korean family. Very nice family, but I think in hindsight they wanted to show their friends that they had foreign friends like me. Wife had everything catered and the home professionally decorated. It felt like we were in a department store. Multiple Christmas trees, a working train set, staff handing out appetizers on plates, etc. It looked like she studied Christmas movies from the USA and copied everything. Dinner is served on a comically long table with 2 huge oven-roasted turkeys and all of the trimmings. They looked perfect. I was later told that Koreans don't like turkey and were just for decoration, they would be thrown out later. We ate Korean food. The family said I could take a turkey home and that the caterer would drop it off with anything else I wanted. Maybe he grew up dirt poor. Had to sleep in the loft above the barn because there was no more space in the house, which was basically a shack, after his baby sister was born. He worked hard, got smart, and moved out to make his fortune when other kids were still deciding what they wanted to be. He never slept well in the huge, sterile houses that followed. He would crack a window, put on nature sounds on surround going to sleep. One day, when he realized he had enough money to never worry again, he thought about what was important to him. By now his family was all gone, the farm had been long sold and he didn't have any ties to the old land. But damn if he couldn't have the childhood peace of going to sleep listening to those gentle beasts laze about in the hay below. He didn't even care what the contractors would think. Even when he had to explain for a third time, yes, I said a retractable floor section so I can hear and see them. That first night he remembered what it was to sleep like a baby. Worked for a hedge fund guy. The kids were actually more or less like regular kids, but he and his wife thought everyone was dumber than they were, not something I gleaned from anything explicit, but an undertone that was present all the time. He was pretty sharp. His wife not so much. Everyone hated her. Everyone she knew and worked with. Everyone would take the opportunity to blow her up the second she left a room because she was so unbelievably fake, petty, spoiled, and demanding. Even some of her friends would do it. He tried to convince me he was paying me too much and tried to negotiate me down. Then in a subsequent conversation asked me if I thought it would be cool for him to buy his son a 400 ounces gold bar. His son was 5 at the time. I used to install DirecTV in wealthy areas of an East Coast city in the US. While I try to give customers options on where I install the satellite dish, I have to get a good line of sight for it to work properly, so sometimes the location options were limited. One rich lady's house, gorgeous house right on the beach, I only found 2 good spots for the dish. It could either be on a pole in the middle of her backyard, or on the corner of the roof. She definitely did not want it in the middle of her yard. Only problem was that she had a metal roof and we use specific mounting hardware for that. We happened to be backordered on that hardware for a few weeks out. When I informed her of this, she got visibly upset that she'd have to wait that long to get her cable up and going. I apologized many times and told her she'd need to reschedule a few weeks later and I leave. 3 days later I'm looking over my work orders for the day and I notice her name and address. I'm like, wow, I bet she thinks she's getting a different installer who she can try to convince to give her a different answer. I was wrong. I pull up to the house, brand new shingle roof. I did the install on the roof. Nothing too fancy, but I used to help build multimillion-dollar homes about a decade ago. One couple, neurosurgeon and dentist, had an office with one of those bookcase doors leading under the stairs. They stored their surround sound equipment and a safe in there. Another house had a very micromanager-esque woman as the owner along with her husband. She would regularly come to the site and order the workers around while the foreman sighed and rolled his eyes at her. At one point he had to order her off the site because she was being a safety hazard to his workers. I remember this couple also has a creepy setup for their kids, 2 bunk beds on either side of a wall for the kids, and both rooms led to a bathroom facing the road with a big bay window right next to the tub. So essentially, any person driving or walking past, or any neighbor could just look over and see these kids taking a bath. I've worked with some fairly wealthy people in the developing world. More or less new money, people who have been successful with some business venture or other. Overall, they're a bit out of touch with the realities of the world. I used to think that they were a bit naive too, because I saw a lot of other people taking advantage of them / outright robbing them. Over time, I realized while that's not untrue, it's more complicated. They did fail to notice a lot of uncollegiate activity on the part of the people they hired, but not all of it. What they did notice, they wrote off as the cost of finding people they could trust with projects that were actually important to them, and work with for years. So yeah, you could overbill them for a few $1,000 once or twice, but if you worked hard and produced results instead, you could bootstrap your whole business to the next level with just them as a client. Eventually, I realized they valued trust a lot more than they valued money. They made their money with fairly long-term, high-risk, high-reward ventures running in parallel, e.g. research. So it all makes a little more sense now. I know plenty of rich useless people too, but not very well. A lot of wealth is simply inherited in Asia. Cash flow is a really difficult thing here. Some people think they're important because they're born rich and act like fools. They do some pretty wild stuff, but I don't stick around to hear about it. Some kids have whole plans and strategies they practice to prevent being kidnapped or harmed by crazy stalkers. One kid I worked with was the kid of a big Hollywood player. And people would stalk the kid in an attempt to get to the parent. So this nutjob wielding a screenplay broke in and cornered the kid. Here I am thinking I am going to have to throw myself physically between them, but the kid dove into a nearby dog kennel and locked themselves in. He couldn't get out, but the nutjob couldn't get in either. So the nutjob just threw the screenplay at him into the kennel. Meanwhile I had called the cops. I was so impressed by the kid's quick thinking and asked how he got the idea. But he said that he always keeps an eye out for a way to escape. And when he sees someone he doesn't know approach, he gets ready to run. I felt awful that this kid had to live like that. If I hadn't seen it happen myself, I would have thought it was just paranoia. Rich broker I worked with got a divorce. His wife wanted $30,000 a month, per child, in child support. His lawyer convinced him it was a good deal and he should take it. He asked me if $30,000 a month was a lot of money. I told him that was more than I make in an entire year. He said, "Fuck, can't believe I have such a shitty lawyer." Cool dude. Had to overnight him some pants because somehow he ended up in Scotland and it was cold and he couldn't be bothered to go shopping. He had a house in Santa Barbara that was given to his first ex-wife that stopped paying taxes on it, basically an abandoned mansion. He sent his assistant there to check it out and there was a family of raccoons living in it. He really liked Grey's Anatomy and needed ice for his Diet Coke. Like really needed ice, so the office got a $1,000 ice machine just on the off chance he showed up to the office. As a chauffeur and ski companion for a mega rich guy's daughter, he sent me out to buy her a birthday present for when she turned 17, I think it was. This was way back in the 70s, so I got her a new BMW 2002, and told the dealer to charge it to the guy. Which was cool, and later the dealer offered me an absolute deal on a trade-in that was the usual cream puff only driven to church on Sundays. $500 for a really good late model used car, but an American car they never dealt in. Much later on, 30 years later, I was working with an architect building a home for another mega rich guy and the library was to be paneled in knotty pine. Guy's wife arrived when it was almost completely trimmed out and says, "Too many knots." So we ripped out the whole interior and the guy, who owned several sawmills, sent back to the mill to ship another truckload so we could select the boards under the wife's direction. And same wife, same building, could not figure out how to turn the car around in the triple wide driveway, so he had a turntable installed in the garage so all she had to do was miss the edges of the door on the way in or out. A cousin works at, let's just say a higher-end, worldwide known hotel chain, and he works at one in a large US city. Couple years back, a random guy came up to him and asked him for a dinner suggestion and says price isn't a concern. My cousin keeps up with what's trendy in the city, knows some owners and such, and gave the guy a suggestion. Next day the guy asked for him by name, gave him $100 and said dinner was amazing, now where should we eat tonight? Another suggestion and the next day, another $100. Only this time, his manager saw this goes down and then a few minutes later, do you know who that is? Nope. I won't say the name, but let's just say old money and probably in the hundreds of millions net worth. Cool story, huh? Well, a couple months later my cousin went to work one day and was told this person would be calling at 6 p.m, and only wanted to speak to my cousin. The conversation was short, basically a we're in town next month for 4 nights, book the 6 of us for wonderful dinners, we trust your opinion. He was given an email for basically their family assistant, and to let that person know the plans. The family arrived, said hi to him as they checked in, and said they were looking forward to their dinners, and 4 days later upon checking out handed him $1,000 for his wonderful local knowledge. Or something like that. My niece married to an absurdly rich guy. His quirk, he did absolutely everything possible to hide his fortune. Simple clothes, normal car, decent but not lavish house, self-allowance. Guy literally hates his fellow multimillionaires in the guts. He told a story when he was really into Formula 1, his dad bought him a karting track. Long story short, the guy got really good and won several small championships, earning a spot in a training camp with some of the current Formula 1 pros. As soon as they realized he came from money, the would-be trainers, other kids, and pretty much everyone started treating him differently, basically saying he is not good enough and that he will be paid for to become a F1 pilot. That story repeated itself many times over from Oxford University, where the guy went to learn, earning a scholarship not by simply paying, to pretty much every business deal where people were trying to get way more simply cause he's filthy rich and can afford it. Gold diggers who were ready to satisfy every adult dream of his only to get into the money, etc. etc. Instead of becoming a cynical asshole version of Scrooge, he and his family just hid that they have wealth. They wanted normal lives and honest human interactions. One of my few jobs is cleaning. It's interesting how frugal the super wealthy are compared to the just pretty wealthy people. There is a very nice Safa couple I clean for who have an amazing house that always smells great and doesn't really need regular cleaning, it's always just so nice. Besides some lovely accessories, they don't really have anything particularly spectacular. Just a well-decorated modern home, nice alcohol, business casual and a nice attitude. Most of our, probably, very wealthy clients are like this. Meanwhile, we also clean for some rather reckless clients. They are wealthy but don't have fuck you money. Their houses are usually messy and they are usually not that pleasant to us either. Nice cars, designer bags, and glasses. Houses look great from outside but inside looks like the A-bomb was dropped. Once had a client open a package that was delivered. I think it was a watch, but it was in a big box so it was hard to tell what it was. She said, "It's a present for my hubby, probably your monthly salary, right?" She didn't even say it with malice, she just said it casually. Like, had she have said something else in the same tone it would have seemed pleasant. It's like they don't acknowledge that you're human. The worst bit is, whatever it was probably worth more than my monthly salary. But she doesn't get 50% off DC shoes so she can suck on those apples. My niece married to an absurdly rich guy. His quirk, he did absolutely everything possible to hide his fortune. Simple clothes, normal car, decent but not lavish house, self-allowance. Guy literally hates his fellow multimillionaires in the guts. He told a story when he was really into Formula 1, his dad bought him a karting track. Long story short, the guy got really good and won several small championships, earning a spot in a training camp with some of the current Formula One pros. As soon as they realized he came from money, the would-be trainers, other kids, and pretty much everyone started treating him differently, basically saying he is not good enough and that he will be paid for to become a F1 pilot. That story repeated itself many times over from Oxford University, where the guy went to learn, earning a scholarship not by simply paying, to pretty much every business deal where people were trying to get way more simply cause he's filthy rich and can afford it. Gold diggers who were ready to satisfy every adult dream of his only to get into the money, etc. etc. Instead of becoming a cynical asshole version of Scrooge, he and his family just hid that they have wealth. They wanted normal lives and honest human interactions.